Thank you all for this. It's such a treat to come here and be part of this really exciting conversation. And it's particularly nice for me because when I got the notice that it should be previously unpublished, after freaking, because that was relatively recent, I thought, okay, I will try to do something new. I'll try to kick a can a little farther down the road. So it's let me talk about an image that I've been interested in ever since I was doing the research on babies in bottles almost 20 years ago. And so what you're going to hear in the 15-minute pseudo TED Talk version, which is going to be really fast, and I apologize, are really embryonic thoughts of a new project. I know, sorry, there are going to be lots of those. And I think it's important for women, but also for human beings and animals and others, or at least that's my purview. So here is the image I was interested in. And this is something that embryologists, developmental biologists, Waddington, C.H. Waddington, included in a talk he gave at a symposium at Rockefeller Foundation Sutherland Conference Center in 1967. And his talk was called The Practical Consequences of Metaphysical Beliefs on a Biologist's Work. And you just heard what I worked on, so you can see why this grabbed me even 20 years ago. So I'm going to talk about that, but first I want to quickly give the frame for my inquiry. Those of you who have read the paper will actually know this, but those of you who haven't, that's why I'm saying it. I got interested in Sarah Ahmed's critique of feminist new materialists for two things. First, for ignoring the many feminist science studies scholars and female scientists engaged in second-wave feminist theory. And she quoted me, which is why I thought, oh God, I better find out what she's talking about and what this is. She criticized us for engaging in knee-jerk anti-biology thinking. So that was one thing, that we had ignored the rich science studies engaged in second-stage feminism. And then that feminist new materialists engaged closely with male writers, as she put it, who are dead and white, while not engaging female writers. And she asked a really important question. What does this uneven distribution of attention and care actually do? So I thought that was really interesting. Now, that's what I started with. But luckily, I don't have to do as much looking at my previous work as I thought I would, because there's already, we've already heard some of that. When I was writing Babies in Bottles, I got very interested in an image, and I take as my method Mary Hoovy's concept: any image that is important to a culture constitutes an arena of ideological construction. So that image grabbed me, and I started thinking, what is being put forth when we, even in the Victorian era, have this image of a baby in a bottle? And particularly did it relate to the ideological debate that was going on when I was researching that book over reproductive technology, as it was then called. Was it oppressive? Was it liberating? And so I started by tracing that image, and I traced it through science fiction and science writing, even to Sheldon Firestone's The Dialectic of Sex, with its wonderful vision of the freeing of women from the tyranny of their reproductive biology by every means available. And this is what she said, including the more distant solutions based on the potential of modern embryology, that is, artificial reproduction. 1967, I think. Okay, so I wrote that book, and I thought, oh great, that was really fun, I enjoyed it. But then afterwards I realized, that I had only told part of the story, because it became clear to me that the whole lifespan was being reshaped. And this reshaping of the whole lifespan was going on, really being led by visions that were going on in science fiction, and then were being picked up in medicine. And I got particularly interested in Victor Turner's notion of liminality, the state of being on a threshold or in between ritualized stages of life, because Turner said that this was cultural, purely cultural, and that the biological stayed fixed. And I thought, I don't think that's the case, actually. So I looked at literature again and other things, and what I found in that book was that transactions between animals and human beings were being used to reshape life through a whole range of technologies, tissue culture, organ transplantation, etc. So that brings me to this. I found, once again, I finished that book and I thought, oops, that's not all of it, because actually we are using animals as well. Even back writing Babies in Bottles, I wrote about how the Experimented Strange Ways research lab on living chick embryos had been huge in the development of biotech and biomedicine, tissue culture, organ transplantation, etc. But what I found when I did the research for poultry science, chicken culture, was that agriculture was actually a venue in which we were really actively reshaping not just people, but living things. And I was particularly interested in the fact that even though that's the case, cultural studies just didn't seem to care about agriculture. So I got very interested in agricultural studies, why we should be looking at it. So that brought me to Cervelloni, to Bellagio, to think about Waddington, who put this conference together in 1967. He brought together 19 people, biologists, physicists, artificial intelligence experts, and a philosopher. 18 men and 1 woman, the philosopher, to convene and map a new discipline of theoretical biology. So, and this is Waddington. And this is when he came up with the image that I'm so interested in. And I'm watching my time elapse, so I'm going to be really quick. He set up the image this way. I'm quite sure that many of the 200 or so experimental papers I produced have been definitely affected by consciously held metaphysical beliefs, both in the types of problems I set myself and in the manner in which I tried to solve. Okay? So he said 2 ideas infiltrated into my thinking at a very early stage without much benefit of academic dignity. I love that. And which have remained there ever since. Okay, so what interests me about this passage? First, the idea, of course, that the world is an egg, focus of everything from embryology to in vitro fertilization to chickens. Then, though, his focus on things, which leaves the category wide open. Sure, it's people, animals, yes, but also rocks and stones and trees. Then I'm interested in his sense of intellectual mastery. Things are, it says, simple enough, with a bland, definite shape. And I notice his sense of distance and otherness from the world egg, which he sees as rather impenetrable. And finally, his sense of the dynamism and agency of things. He turns back around, and surprise, it's a fluffy yellow chip, active and ready to imprint on you if you give it half a chance. But most of all, and this is what grabbed me, his response to the little yellow chip, he thinks it's unsettling, even perhaps a bit sinister. Well, that totally interested me. Now, I'm just flipping through some of the other things that about him. This is the medal that's given out in his honor. You can see the Drosophila wing, the Ouroboros, the egg, and the chromosomes. And then, unsettling, even perhaps a bit sinister. What? No? Yeah, really. So what interested me is this exclusion that he made. He says, first in the thing he says, these had a huge impact on all of my 200 or so experiments. Then in the same talk he says, I don't see that these thoughts have had any direct influence on the way in which I've conducted experimental work, which is the subject we're discussing here. Well, you know, if you read symptomatically, you know something's going on. So that's what I was interested in. And I'm just going to take my last little bit of time to scan through what I think is going on. And I'm putting epigenesis, unfortunately, aside for the moment. Maybe we can talk about it. It's too big a concept to try to race through. So the question is, that was Waddington's idea of the world egg, unsettling, even perhaps sinister. What that means to me, actually, is that there is a way in which he's detaching himself from his engagement with that little chick that he sets going, that imprints on him, okay? Instead, we've got the world egg insight operationalized going only one way. And this is what it gives us. Its main applications in the arena of engineering and marketing life, the control of breeding and the improvement of stock, both efficiency and quality, and in biomedicine, the development of a range of interventions from replacement medicine to regenerative medicine to epigenetic medicine. Okay. So quickly through the agricultural, we've got the global poultry industry. Then notice we've got the move from the global poultry industry to eugenics. Now it's a little, if you read this, you can see the blur over. We're going to be working on animals, but if we're engineering animals, we should be engineering people too. It's a little known fact that this is Cold Spring Harbor Labs, where Harry Laughlin and Charles Davenport established the Eugenics Research Center in 1907. They conducted research there on poultry heredity, eye color, feather color, as part of their eugenic mission. And Laughlin, who was the author of Eugenical Sterilization in the United States, served as an expert witness in the Buck versus Bell case in 1924, which upheld the therapeutic sterilization of 17-year-old Harry Buck. The injuries of eugenics are one clear result of this one-way manipulation of the human being, but that wasn't the only kind of injury, as the technologies of controlling reproduction spread from animals to human beings. Women were also injured by interventions to control reproduction, and then there was another kind of injury going on, the injury to poultry workers. Okay? The injury to poultry workers who, in Mississippi, in John Fish's wonderful film Mississippi Chicken, are predominantly undocumented immigrants who are working in horrible conditions and suffering major physical and psychological abuse. And then on the right, that's Linda Lord, who is working on the killing floor at Penobscot Poultry, a Maine poultry company that was just closed in a sort of takeover. I've argued that all of these injuries are linked to that curious exclusion that Waddington makes in his discussion of the world egg, the sense that the relationship between Waddington and his experimental subject, that chick, does and doesn't have an impact on his work as an experimental scientist. It isn't a two-way relationship. The chick may imprint on him, but he doesn't imprint on the chick. He is separate from what he studies. So I went back to the Cervelloni Symposium again. So in Sarah Ahmed's terms, I spent a lot of time devoted to Waddington. Now I'm going back to see what else is there. And I found somebody who really diagnosed the issue. And that was the one woman at the symposium, Marjorie Green, who was a philosopher of biology that I've just gotten really entranced with. Look at her sense of what philosophy is about. I mean, this is an unusual philosopher. Marjorie Green diagnosed the problem with the symposium with very terse accuracy. And here's what she said. The context within which the most articulate participants in the symposium approached their problem was thoroughly functional. And she argued instead that, that emergent orders have to be apprehended not through manipulation of means, but through understanding. Well, Green's critique was completely ignored. Waddington made a joke at it and turned to David Bohm, theoretical physicist, and she was never invited back to the next two symposia. But she went on in an extraordinary career to advance a much more interactive, dispersed, and resonant view of life as always in process, always responding to an environment, always shaping it. So the question is, what have we learned from thinking about this little story of Waddington and Green and the world egg? Well, this is Sarah Ahmed again, and I like her comment. But I would also end with a comment from Jane Bennett's lovely book, Vibrant Matter, because that also seems to me to speak to what we're talking about. And she says, I believe that encounters with lively matter, and she means the whole horizontal range of matter, can chasten my fantasies of human mastery, highlight the common materiality of all that is, expose a wider distribution of agency, and reshape the self and its interests. So, these are the eggs. Thank you.